Welcome. My name is Mike Milligan. I'm the owner of AccuNet. AccuNet is a VAR. That's short for value-added reseller to Nonprofit Plus, which is the software solution we'll be showing today after we give an overview and some background on how it fits for nonprofits. So AccuNet adds value with consultants throughout Ohio. We actually work across the country, but we're located in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. We have expertise in deploying financial systems, especially nonprofit systems. We add training, consulting, customization reports, integration help, and especially design and implementation skills using the FASB rules, which I think is the key value add for nonprofits. So I'll have my face up here for a minute, and then I'll flip it off so that you guys can focus on the slide deck. James Dean is presenting for us today after I give an overview, and he's an expert in Nonprofit Plus and nonprofit businesses, and he'll be doing the demonstration for us and showing some of the key business processes that nonprofits use, and we think really makes it a good fit for nonprofit organizations. All right, let's move on here to the agenda. So here's the agenda for cloud accounting for nonprofits. This session will be pretty fast-paced and highlight the major concerns for nonprofits that are considering improving or replacing their current ERP financial nonprofit management systems. Even if you're not replacing your system, I think you might pick up a few tips in this presentation that might help you improve your existing nonprofit accounting solution. So the common challenges for businesses is handling what I call the multiple pieces of the puzzle that make up their financial ERP, CRM, grant and fund management, volunteer management, marketing, financial reporting, budgeting. Those are all the puzzle pieces that it takes to get this job done. And our philosophy is as much as possible, and it's never totally one system, but is to get as much as possible into one system and then just handle the few outliers with a very tight integration so that we reduce errors, spreadsheet systems, redundant data entry, and that type of thing. So our guiding principle is all-in-one with seamless connection to special applications. Another point here is that the cost of user licenses can really be have a dampening effect on the implementation and utilization of an ERP system. If it costs even $500 a user, that makes everybody do a cost value decision on whether we should put another user in the system. Our philosophy is unlimited users, so that I don't care if it's a volunteer, I don't care if it's a receptionist, I don't care if it's a board member that needs one report a month. Everybody can have access to the system. Everybody's in the pool. Everybody can utilize it and get full value out of it. We've got the security to handle that so that people can't do what they're not allowed to do, but we get everybody into the system. After all, they don't call it enterprise resource planning, ERP system, for nothing. It's because it's supposed to run your entire enterprise. And if you're making cost value decisions on the price of a license, then the information just gets restricted really to the four walls of the accounting department, and you lose a lot of value out of that data because you're not sharing it with the rest of the organization. Mobile is here. The millennial generation coming up does 90% of what they need to do with a computer on their smartphone. So any modern ERP application needs to be mobile enabled, and that comes with the systems that we provide. It's not an extra cost. It's just there. It's part of the system. So if somebody wants to approve a purchase order, they get an alert on a new grant that needs some work before it can be submitted. We can send those alert outs. They get them on their cell phone. If they can't handle it from the cell phone or make a call, then they get to a computer and get that fixed. So there's a lot you can do with a mobile phone, and a mobile application, we're just finding more and more uses for it all the time. The things you would expect, time and expense management, clocking in, clocking out, that type of thing is kind of standard. But alerts and approval processes for purchase orders, that type of thing, is something that we can do with the mobile apps. Document management is a key thing that should be a standard part of any ERP system today, so that when you get a new contract, you get a grant, a voucher, even a supporting worksheet, a picture, all those documents can be attached right to the transaction, so that if it's in the general ledger, great, it goes there. If it's in the AP, it goes there. If it's in the grant or fund or project module, it goes there, so that anybody researching that later can, when they see that transaction, they'll also see that document, and they can pull that up and get the supporting material that explains why that transaction was approved or that GL adjustment was made the way it was made. So document management is very powerful and should be a standard part, and it can also be used by the auditors. There's no reason the auditor can't just, in an unlimited user system, can't be another user on the system. They can do their research, do their queries, pull up documents all within the system, and that'll drive down audit cost. Nonprofits, have events, volunteers, multiple offices, remote workers, that need access from any device, anytime, anywhere. And with the modern cloud accounting system, you get that. So that if they need to work at home, if you got people on maternity leave, disabled, you're setting up an event and you need, for 3 days, you're at the Pelotonia or something, you can put those users right out there with a mobile hotspot, and they can do the key work they need to do to sign up registrants, to take donations, collect money, that type of thing. They can do it right there at that remote event. So a modern cloud system really opens up the flexibility to have temporary offices, temporary events, and dispersed workers. And it really doesn't matter where they're at. If they can get to the internet, they can get to your system with strong security. Dashboards is another key thing for any modern system, is to have it be dashboard driven, so that if I'm the AP clerk and I sign into the system, I see that a PO, purchase order, was received, and I can process the next step on that accounts payable. I can see the AP documents that I have to approve and enter today. I can see maybe credits I need to issue. Those type of things can all be right there on my dashboard, and it kind of codifies the work processes that I need to do. And that's what we want to get to with dashboards, and the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is workflow. Universal workflow should be a standard part of any system. In the older systems that we worked with 10, 15 years ago, they had workflows for a few things, like maybe a time and expense approval was a workflow, or a purchase order. Once a purchase order is received, maybe that purchase order flowed to accounts payable so that check could be cut. Those were simple workflows that would be codified or hard-coded into the system. But modern systems come with a universal workflow engine. So basically anything I can think up that has repeated steps in it, I can codify my business process into a workflow and then make sure that we follow the same steps every time. So you build in your business processes to the ERP system with modern workflow. So that's a key element we want to see in modern systems. And if you've got the document management, if you've got unlimited users so you can get your auditor in the system, you've built in your workflow processes, you're going to make less mistakes, you're going to do better in an audit, and the auditor can self-serve most of their information, which is going to drive down the cost of that audit, because you're not going to have 2 or 3 people researching and pulling documents that the auditor wants to see. Set that auditor down at a workstation and let them pull up and query and research everything they want to research, and not impact your staff's time so much. So that reduces the cost of an audit on both sides, I believe. So why is AccuNet credible? Why should you be listening to us? Well, I think this session will be worth your time. You will learn ways to improve your current system even if you're not replacing it. AccuNet has over 30 years of ERP implementation experience, and historically about 40% of our customer base has been nonprofits. Also, a lot of our consultants come from a nonprofit industry, so they bring that nonprofit experience where they were a controller or a CFO. They bring that experience to the implementation. So some of our customers are people like Kappa, Columbus Chamber, Greater Cleveland Partnerships, Centers for Families, and Community Blood of Dayton are just a few of our customers. Our focus is always going to be process-driven and ROI results-oriented. So everything we suggest, we're not going to suggest it just because it's gee whiz or neat. We're going to suggest it because it's something that saves time, saves money, improves compliance, reduces the cost of an audit, and is a standard business process that we want to help you implement so that it pays for itself. AccuNet tries to be a one-stop shop for our nonprofit customers. We invest in our clients and the people that want to work with us with a free discovery. And in that free discovery, we go over many of the principles that we're going to be talking about in this webinar, and help them build a strong requirements, help them determine their key needs, look at their business processes, and help them get an ROI out of the system implementation so that they know the work that we're going to do is going to pay for itself. So just to promote our next webinar a little bit, it's on budgets, financial reporting, and forecasting, or business intelligence. And it's aimed at nonprofits. Any for-profit business would get something out of it too, because this is a standard application that works with any ERP system. But this next webinar is coming up on Tuesday, September 24th at 2 o'clock, and you can register for it at the same events page on our website that you signed up for this one. So let's talk about the software solution that we implement is called Nonprofit Plus, and it was developed specifically for nonprofit organizations. And this is important because most accounting software was developed for-profit businesses, and then they modified it to make it fit a nonprofit business. It's an orientation that makes a big difference in the look and feel and ease of use of the accounting system if it was designed for a nonprofit business. So Nonprofit Plus is what we're going to be showing today. AccuNet's certified on that product, and that's what we recommend for nonprofit businesses. Many budgets can be entered in the system for a grant for each fund, each department, or each program. So those budgets are very specific. Reporting is critical for a nonprofit organization because they can be the difference between renewing a grant money or not. Grant money and donations are the lifeline of an organization. Nonprofit Plus can help secure additional funding and foster additional growth. Just kind of a little overview of the core modules that we have here for this system. And things like grant management, encumbrances, fund management, donor management, all those features are built into these standard accounting modules. So encumbrances, for example, is in the requisitions in the purchase order. Budget is throughout the system. So you don't see a fund module or a grant module, but that's because those features are just built in. And one thing I want to point out today is the CRM module. Nonprofit Plus is not a fundraising module. It doesn't have a fundraising module. So when you look at something like Razor's Edge, which has a specific fundraising module, that's what it does. We're not that. But it's my experience that most nonprofits don't need Razor's Edge or a fundraising module. Not to say that they don't do some fundraising. Everybody does. And they definitely do some donor management. They want to keep track of the donors and how much they've donated, where that money was spent, so they can report back to them and show them that their money was efficiently spent. But the CRM system that comes with Nonprofit Plus is built in. So you see a lot of people using things like Salesforce or Microsoft CRM, which are good systems, good CRM systems, and can be used for mailings and marketing and fundraising events, but they're not integrated to the back-end accounting system. So they end up spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, not to mention the per user price they're paying for the licenses. And it ends up being very costly and not seamlessly integrated. So we can work with packages like Microsoft CRM and Salesforce, but it's one of our guiding principles that the CRM system should be built into the ERP system. And that's what happens with this. And with our CRM system, you can do things like mailing list management, sending mailings out very granularly, very specifically. You can have non-subscribed lists. All that stuff is built in. You can do a marketing campaign and track the cost of that campaign and how much it developed or how much it generated for incoming funds. So it's our suggestion that in most cases you can use a standard CRM system if you're not really heavy into the fundraising. If it's 90% of what you do is fundraising, well, then you probably don't want this system. But if fundraising is just an important part of the operation and delivering the services is the bigger part, well, then I think this system might work for you, and we'd like to show it to you. So let's talk just briefly about environment. So this is all browser based. All you need is Internet Explorer, Chrome, the Apple browsers, and you can get to this system. It doesn't require Citrix, doesn't require terminal services, which is RDP. There's no client install. All you need to do is pop up a browser and go to a website. But it's still fully encrypted and totally secure. Our users on this system never get ransomware because ransomware can't get to a web application like this. There's no way it can jump across that wire. Mobile's included. Another key thing is that it's unlimited users. So anybody that needs access can get access to it with proper security. And it includes all the common tools you'd expect. Things like customization manager, integration with any of the services that are out there like Dropbox, DocuSign, credit card applications, those type of things. Those are all built in. Dashboard creation comes with it, and it's easy enough that your average power user can set those up for everybody else. Does not require a programmer. And it has the workflow that I mentioned earlier. So as far as key features, when balancing multiple funds is necessary, the system will automatically generate the due to from for entries. Therefore, the person entering the data doesn't have to make those entries, which reduces entry cost. The end result is funds that maintain a balance. Redistribute accounts payable to accurately record and distribute an expense in the general ledger by fund in order to provide accurate and detailed reporting by fund, and record and inquire on not only realized expenses, but also anticipated expenses that have not yet been realized. Jim will also be showing you the budget checker feature, which provides availability to check budget of data entry point by line item on multiple screens, on bills, purchase orders, requests, and requisitions. The same applies to grant expenditures. Each fund contains its own fund record and provides for detailed defining and recording of data. This includes details such as permanent and temporary restricted or unrestricted funds, defining the specific accounts and sub-accounts for that specific fund, and applying a specific cash account to that fund to prevent commingling of funds if needed. And then finally, we've got grant management, and we define and report on each grant. There's no restriction on defining the grant life, whether it's 12 months or 42 months, etc. It doesn't have to match the fiscal year. Apply separate budgets for each grant. Manage multiple grant sponsors and benefactors in each grant. Also, inquiries and reporting are available for each grant. Availability of tracking and reporting on the data can increase the opportunity for grant renewals. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jim. Jim, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, thank goodness. There you are. All right, so I'm gonna make you the presenter, and then
Okay.
James, go ahead and take it over. And I'm gonna kill my video.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Mike. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your time today to take a look at Nonprofit Plus. What I wanted to do was start out by just going over some navigation and user experience, starting here on our landing page. And then we're going to get into grants and funds after we review some navigation and user experience and give you a little taste of what it's like to move around in the program. So as I said, we're going to start here on the landing page, which is a dashboard for grants. So some of the information I'm going to be stating is going to be just reconfirming some of the things that Mike had mentioned. So this is a live screen. The data here is drillable. So if I click on one of these widgets, that's going to take us into the grants. We have 17 active grants, and that's going to take us over to that. What's nice about this is that as we said, you can have unlimited users on the system. So if others are making entries into the system, you're going to be receiving that live data at the same time. When you refresh your screen, you'll see that data that was entered maybe 30 seconds earlier, so that you're always working with up-to-date and live data. So I'm going to start with the universal search up here. This is a great way for us to be able to find different items in the system. If I was to type in bill, we have type ahead, which the system goes out and finds everything that has to do with bill, and it brings them up as suggestions. So I can find the specific page that I'm looking for. The same applies to transactions and profiles. Anything that has to do with bill and transactions would come up. If you have a specific transaction number, you could type that in here, and it will find that for you in the system. In addition, there's help articles. So if we're talking with a bill, it's going to bring up potential articles that will help with the understanding of bills. And then lastly, we have files. You can search the system for files. So you're going to see when I start demonstrating that there are multiple locations where you can add a file to a record. So if you know the file name, you can type it in here and it'll search throughout the system to find the file that you're looking for. Lastly, if we go up here and we've got the help button here, I'm just going to wait for that to finish loading. So if I click on that help button, it's going to give me help that applies to this page. So if I wanted to open a dashboard, if I wanted to add a column chart, if I wanted to add a funnel chart, it's going to tell me how to do that. If I wanted to research concepts about the dashboard or widget configuration, data table widgets, you can learn about that here under concepts. So that's a very helpful tool as well. Up here we have the date and time. Doesn't seem like a big deal. But what's nice about this is, let's say you're in February and your year end is 12/31. You may have a number of entries that need to be entered for the end of the year. So we can change the date and time to 12/31 of the previous years, and then start to work in the system, and everything, all the transactions and everything that you do in the system will date automatically to 12/31, which makes it much easier to not have to keep changing the dates, but also help reduce entry error. So that's a nice feature. When you're done, you can either switch the time and date back, or if you were to log out and come back in, it automatically resets to the current time and date. You're going to notice over here on the left side, we have a panel of workspaces. And again, this is all customizable to the specific user. One thing we just want to do, jump back here. If we look at dashboards, this is a grant dashboard. We have dashboards for AR clerks, AP clerks, the controller, grant manager. So there's a number of different dashboards, and they can be built out and customized for the individual users. So that's really helpful, so that the information is specific to the user. So again, we have workspaces here. This also is customizable. These can be moved around. They can be eliminated. You can see here we have more items. So we have additional items on the menu that we can choose from. But if we don't want to have all of these menus or we don't use any of them, it's very easy to take this and just click out of it or add it back in. So if I come up here and click on dashboards, you're going to see the pin here. If I unpin that and I come back over, you can see the dashboards is gone, and you're going to find it again here under more items. So again, it's just a way to be able to customize and make it easier for the user. So if I was to go into the grant workspace, immediately what comes up is a quick menu. So this quick menu is going to be a collection of screens or reports and inquiries that I want to use on a pretty regular basis. There may be a screen or inquiry that's not on here. I can show the full menu, and I can probably find the one that I'm looking for. Now, it's very easy to add items from the full menu onto the quick menu. You can see here that all the items that are checked are on the quick menu. So it's very easy to add it into the quick menu or uncheck it and take it off the quick menu. So again, just making it easier and quicker to be able to move around and find the things you want in the system. Then we can exit out of that. It'll take it to all items, and I can switch back to quick menu. You'll notice up here on the top as well, we have favorites button. In each of the modules, we have the quick menu, and those are all the items pertaining to the specific workspace that you're in. In this case, it's the grant management. But I can also add these to the favorites. And so I can have a collection of all the different workspaces, pages, screens, items, reports, and add them all to my favorites page so that I have everything just in one location. So you'll see here that there are stars next to each one of these. There's a star next to grant. If I click on the star, it's going to add it to my favorites page. Click on favorites, and there's the grant. If I want to remove it, just click the star off. It takes it away, and then you don't have it on the favorites page. But it's all in the process of being able to find what you want, find what you need to do as quick as possible and as easy as possible. So that gives you a taste of what it's like to move around in the system to find things that you're looking for, and a little bit of the user experience. So we're going to take a look now at the grant management. Specifically, we're going to look at grants. Now I can come in here to the grants page, and I can click on grants. That'll take me there. Or I can come up here, as I said earlier, type in grants. As I'm typing, it's going to bring in all my selection possibilities, and grants is what I want. So I'm going to go in here to into the grants profiles, and it's going to give me the list of grants that are in the system. You're going to notice here that we have some tabs, all records, active, and drill downs. Over here, we have a filtering mechanism, so we can actually add tabs to this, again, customizing it to the way the user wants to set this up. If I wanted to have grants that are all federal grants, we could have a federal grant tab here. So when I click on that, all the federal grants appear. Another way to be able to just customize things and find things quickly and easily. We're going to take a look at the 008 grant record. You're going to notice also that a lot of the screens are similar throughout the Acumatica system. You're going to notice here up here on the top, we have the summary section, and then down on the bottom we have the grid or the details. So if we start at the top with the summary, we have our grant ID 008. We have a description. We have a fund ID. If we want to add a fund that's to be used specifically for this grant, we can choose a fund that's to be used for this grant, or we can leave that blank and allow access to all the different funds for use in the grant. Notice here we have status, and currently it's on active. So in order for this grant to be used in the system, it needs to be on the active status. That way there we can enter transactions, and we can actually use it in the system. In the beginning though, you may have it on prepare as you're beginning to define the grant and build out the grant. You may have it defined, you may have put in applications for grants, and we'll be waiting for awards. You may have the status on pre-award at that point. Then at the point where you're awarded the grant, you can just simply then switch it to active. And the reason why this is significant is because you're able to transition from one phase to another seamlessly. And it's very easy to move throughout these different phases and end in active and to be able to actively use that grant record.
Hey, Jim, if I can make one point here, this
Sure.
is a great example of how to use where a workflow can be used. So maybe one person can set up the grant, but for accounting to approve it for transactions to be entered in, maybe the controller has to approve it. So you set up a workflow that once the grant is won, it goes to accounting to be activated. And they're the ones that have the security and the ability to activate it so that purchase orders and costs can start to flow into that grant.
All right,
Thanks,
great. Yeah, great. Thank you, Mike. So next we have grant classes. And if you have a number of different types and a lot of similarities and different ones, you can have different grant classes. Here we have federal grants, OMB, non-federal as classes. And we also have a manager. If you want to assign a grant manager to this grant, you can do that. And then over here, we have a very high level view of the financials, revenues, expenses, asset liabilities, billed amounts, committed amounts, that sort of thing. Very high level view. But I do want to note up here in the top right corner, this is pretty significant. You can add notes to this as well. There's some important items that you want to bring out so that anybody that's going into this grant record will know you can add those grants here. And also files. So we were talking earlier here about if you were in the pre-award, you're waiting for that award to be granted to you, you receive it, and now you want to attach all of the documents and files together with it. You can simply add it right here under files and keep track of all of the documents right here in the files so it's all attached to the grant record. Makes it very easy and very, very efficient to have all your data and all your information in one location. So with that being said, we're going to jump down here to the details in the grid level. We're going to start with grant life. So as Michael was saying earlier, you can define the grant to whatever time period you need. So you have a start date and an end date. The system is automatically going to calculate the number of months. And this situation happens to be 36, but it could be 12 months, it could be 18 months, it could be 42 months, it could be 7 years. Whatever's necessary, you can get that set up here. We can also add a procurement life. You may have a grantor that says, you know what, I'd like you to get your vendors and things set up, maybe get some bidding done beforehand. You can set up a procurement life beforehand, and that's where you'd set that up here. Down here, you're going to see we have grant type, and here we have a grantee. And we're also specifically labeling the budget tracking by account and sub-account. But what I want to do is take a look at this grantee. So if we jump up here to participants, here we would list all of the people that are associated with this grant. So here we have a grantor. In this particular situation, there's one grantor. That's the New York International Bureau here, Beauty School. And so they're the grantor, but you can also have multiple grantors for this one grant. You may have 2 or 3 or 5 different grantors, but in addition, you can also have benefactors. So if we were to add a participant, we would come up here onto the grant participant page, and we can fill out the different information that's necessary for that grant participant. But what I'd like to do is jump on this one that's existing. So we have the grant ID that this grantor is associated with. We have all their contact information. We have a description of who they are, and here we have type. So we can have the type of participant here. And And we have a number of ones that it can be listed as cost share, match contract, or a benefactor. So you may also be a pass-through organization. So you may have grantors, and you may have be taking some of this money and passing it to other institutions or individuals as a grant provider. So those would be listed as benefactors, and you can keep track of all of them in the system as well. So it's very flexible to be able to keep track of that. And each one of them will be listed here, and there is no limit to the number. You could have, 5 benefactors or contractors and, 5 grantors as well. So all that's kept track for you right here in the grant record. Here in the budget tab, we would have any budgets that are associated with this grant. We can also have attributes. I find the attributes to be very, very helpful, because if there's specific data and information that you want to collect on the grant, this can be set up as user-defined attributes. That way there you can collect all the information that you want that is important to you, and you can add that into this area here. Next, we have activities. So we're going to keep track of anything that's going on within the grant record here. You can add a task, you can add an event, add email. There's other different types of activities, notes, chats, add a message. You may have a phone call. You want to record the details of the phone call. You can add that here. So it's a great way to be able to keep track of everything that's happening within the grant. Next, we have the accounts tab. So here we're going to list all the accounts that are associated with this grant. Now, typically, these are going to be a subset of all of the accounts within the system. Only the accounts that are specific for this grant are listed here and will be used for this grant. So it simplifies the choices for data entry, and it also reduces data entry error. Next, we have sub-accounts. And again, same thing, it's going to be a subset of all the sub-accounts in the system. Just the sub-accounts that are associated with this grant will be listed here. Next, we have contacts. And these are going to be other individuals that are associated with this grant. You may have some grantors that may be a large institution, and there may be 2 or 3 different people within that grantor company that you interact with. So you would want to list, those 2 or 3 individuals here under contacts. Next, we have employees. So these are all the employees that are associated with this grant as well that would work within the grant. And you're going to see here that we have different modules with which they can work within. So we have user roles that are set up in the system, which allow users access to different screens within the system. Here we're going to limit or allow access to data within the screens. So in this one here, Todd Bloom, he's allowed access to data in the general ledger and accounts payable, but he's not allowed access in purchase receipt or request or these other different modules. So you can get very granular with what users that you allow to access what data within the system. And it's not only with grants, but it's throughout the system. You can get very granular with user access, which makes it very handy, especially as your organization gets larger. Lastly, we have inventory items. So inventory items are going to be non-stock items. Another term could be expense codes. And basically, this is just a way of being able to get more granular and more detail in your budgeting and in your tracking of expenses. So inventory items would only have listed items here if you were budgeting by inventory items. If you weren't budgeting by inventory items, let's say you were budgeting by account or account to sub-account, this inventory items would be empty. But you have multiple ways that you can budget by. This is just a very granular way of being able to budget. So that gives you an overview of the grant record itself. What I wanted to do next was to move on to taking a look at some of the inquiries that we have here. So we're going to go into our grants quick menu, and we're going to take a look at grant activity details. We're going to plug in the 008 grant, which we've been looking at here. So we're going to look at the grant activity details for everything that's happening in this grant for a specific period of time. So this here, we're going 2010 to 2018, 17 to 2018. What's nice is it's very specific. If you want to narrow it down to a month, a week, a couple months, you can do that and find all the activity that's occurring in this grant. What's nice is a lot of information that's provided here. You may be looking for specific types of transactions. So let's say here I'm looking for a transaction that has the word kits in it. So if I type in kits, click OK, it's going to look under those descriptions and find all the transactions that have kits in it, if that's what you're looking for. So you can get very specific on finding the information that you need in here as well. What's nice is that you can also sort by ascending or descending. If you want to find greater than, less than, is between different numbers, you can do that. So there's many different ways of finding transactions, amounts, and different types of data that you need. All of these tabs are movable. We can move them around to make it more easier for the user and how they want to view the data. Columns are sizable. You can adjust them to be able to adjust it the way you want. Now you may move around these headings here, but when you leave the screen and come back, they're going to revert back to the way they were. So I can come over here, this icon here, and I can make it permanent through the column configuration. So if I want to set it up in a certain layout, or if I want to add or take away different columns, we can do that here. So if I want the business account to be moved up, I can move that up. I can move it back down. If I want to add something, I can add it over. I can remove it. So you can set it up exactly the way you want. Once that's set up here, it's permanent. I click OK, and then each time I come back into the screen, that's the way it's going to be viewed. Again, very customizable. Next, we're going to take a look at grant by inventory item. Here we're doing, again, we can do this by time period. Here I just have a few years that are up that we're looking at it. But we're going to list all of the expenses by inventory item. Again, a very granular way of doing that. But you can see here the inventory items, and you can see the amount of money that is committed towards that. And I'm going to go over these different columns in a minute here, but I just want to give you a taste of what another way that you can inquire and look at the details here. You can also look at it at this data by business account. Type in 008. So as you know, a business account is going to be customer, vendor, employee. Just another way to be able to slice and dice and look at the data within this grant. So we have customers, we have employees. You may be budgeting by salaries and employees. This is the way you're going to be able to view that data and see all the financials that are going on within this grant by business account. Next, I want to take a look at grant by account. So here we're looking now at the grant by account. So again, we have all the accounts that are listed. We have the amount that has been committed towards that budget, and we have the budget amount. Now we can also come up here and we can take a look at a little more details, and we can look at that including income. So we can look at that by income and expense. So here we're going to have the different sources of income and then what the total income amounts are. And now we can compare that to the expenses or the accounts. And we can look at the net totals at the bottom. Just another way to be able to view that data. Next, we're going to look at grant summary. So this is a great view because now we're looking at all of the grants within the system, and it's a very high bird's eye view. So I do want to go into these different columns at this point, but we do have the different grants that are in the system, and now we're looking at it same as some of the other screens that we looked at. We're going to go into looking at what these different columns are. So you're going to look here. You're going to notice that we have reserved, we have encumbered, unposted, actual, committed, and budget. So the reserve columns, if you have someone that's putting in a request, let's say you have someone in the office that's putting in a request for paper, they put in a request, it's a $500 request, that would be listed here. Let's say then you have need for a copier, it's an expensive copier, let's say it's a $15,000 copier, you're going to go out to bid on it. You go through the bidding process, you choose your vendor, now you issue a PO. So now that $15,000 would now show under the encumbered column. So we're keeping track of anticipated expenses to come. Next, we have the unposted column. So this is going to be unposted items. Typically, it might be time and expense or salaries that haven't been posted yet. And then lastly, we have actual. These are going to be all of the expenses that have been posted to the general ledger. So when you add up these four columns, it's going to equal the total committed. So now we have not only expenses that have incurred, but anticipated expenses coming down the road. And now we can compare that total amount to the budget. Now it may be a budget, there may be a revised budget along the way. You can compare it to the revised budget. But in the end, you're going to be able to see what's available in dollars and then what's available in percentage-wise. And that in this particular situation, it's going to be for all of the different grants that are listed. But from here, now I can double click because these are drillable. I can double click. I can go now and view the page that we saw earlier, which is grant by account. And we can see that information here, same type of columns. If we were using the encumbrance with these grants, we would see all that information here and we'd be able to look at that by account. And then we could even drill down deeper and we can look at it at the sub-account level as well. So a lot of different ways that we can view the data, we can analyze the data, we can see what's going on from a high level view, and we can drill down and get into more details and really be able to analyze the data so we can make good financial decisions. So those are some of the items I wanted to show you on the grant record and inquiries and reporting and things. Next, I wanted to take a look at funds. So click on here, we'll look at funds. So this is very simple. This is a demo site, so it's a very simple site with simple data in it. And here we have three different funds. They happen to be named what they are: permanent restricted, temporary restricted, and unrestricted. We're going to jump in here on the TR, or temporary restricted fund. And here we have the fund record now. You're going to notice it's very similar to the grant record. We have the summary up top. There is differences because it is a different animal. So we do have the summary on the top, and we have the details on the bottom. I do want to make note again, you'll see up here in the right corner, we have notes that we can add. We have the files that we can add. So on the top here, we have the fund ID TR. We have a description of it. Again, a status. Active, prepared, cancel, hold inactive, different statuses depending where you are with the fund. Again, in order to use it in the system and to enter transactions, it needs to be active. Here we're going to define the type of fund it is, whether it be temporary or permanent restricted or unrestricted. You would list that here. Again, fund class, if you can classify different funds, if you have a lot of different funds, you want to classify them, you can do that here. You can apply a manager. Just like we can with the grant. Down below, we have, again, the detail or the grid level. And we start here with cash accounts. So we mentioned earlier that if you have a situation where you need to prevent commingling of funds, we can add a cash account here. And the cash account that's listed here would then be the only cash account that can be used with this fund. again, therefore preventing any commingling of funds. If it's not listed here, then you can access multiple cash accounts for the fund. But that is available if you need to prevent commingling of funds. And you can see the tabs. The rest of the tabs here are very similar. We have budget, where you list your budget. Attributes, we don't have much data in this, but you're going to get the same idea. It's the same type of data that we'd be entering. Attributes here, we have activities, all the accounts that are associated with this fund, the sub-accounts that are associated with this fund. Again, only a subset of all the sub-accounts pertaining specifically to this fund. Any contacts, people that are associated with this fund, employees and access and data access rights, and then inventory items if we're budgeting at that level. So that's what the fund record looks like. Again, it is very similar, but it's great because it doesn't matter how many funds you're using here, whether you're using 5 funds or 100 funds, there is no limit to the number of funds that you're using here. The reporting and inquiries are going to be very similar to what we just saw in the grants. We can look at it we can take a look at that at the fund summary, which would be the same look that we saw earlier. We're going to have the 4 columns. We're going to have all the different funds that are listed here. We can look at the reserved and encumbered, all the committed. We can compare it to the budget on a very high level view. We can then click onto them and view it by account and then by sub account if we want to continue clicking and going deeper to see the details. So again, reporting inquiries are going to be very similar. Next, what I wanted to do was let's take a look here at bills and adjustments. So we talked about budget checker, and I did want to click in and take a look at what that looks like. So we're going to click into a bill. Again, the view on it very similar. We have the overview and we have the detail down at the bottom. So here we have specific entries for this bill. And you notice that on the entry, we can choose the fund and grant and program that we want it to apply to. And here's our budget checker. So this is really important because we can check this at the entry level. So we're on this first item here. We're going to click on budget checker. And you can see here that applies to the grant. You see here that the grant for this item is grant 018. So when we click on that budget checker, that's what we're going to be checking, the grant on that 018 grant. We can see what the adopted budget is. We can see all the same columns that we've been looking at earlier, actual, unposted, and covered reserve. And then we'll be able to see how this transaction affects that budget. This one's already been released, so that's why it says released. Otherwise, it would tell us how this is going to affect the budget on this entry level. And you notice here that we can compare this budget by different time periods, period to date, year to date, grant to date, total grant. So we can look at it in multiple different views. Makes it really, really convenient to be able to keep track and keep a tight grasp of our budget at different levels. So if I click on the next item here and click on budget checker, you're going to see the grant is 01. We click on budget checker for that line. Now it's going to look at the 01 grant. And we're going to be able to look at all the same information. So as I said earlier, we're looking at the details here at budget checker at the entry level. And we saw earlier that we can look at the budget on a very high level view when we look at the grant summary or the fund summary. And then again, we can click into it and view that in greater detail. So for today, those were the main items that I wanted to touch on. Specifically, we were honing in on the grant, on the fund, the record, the inquiries. We took a look at the user navigation, user experience. And with that said, I just wanted to open that up for questions, or Mike, if you wanted to go over a few more things before opening up to questions, you can take that from there.
Yeah, let's definitely
Muted.
open it up for everybody.
Unmuted.
Seth, if you could help me on that to make sure everybody's can talk if they want. So jump with any questions, and then what I can do is change the presenter back to me and show you just a few things on licensing that may be of interest. So when you license this solution, you can get it in a SaaS model, which means pure cloud, and it's actually hosted on Amazon. And they take care of all the hardware, the software licensing, maintenance plan, upgrades, backup, disaster recovery, virus protection. All that stuff is included in the SaaS plan. A second option, but what is neat is we still have a few people say, I don't want to put it in Amazon. I want to put it in a data center, maybe that's in my town, so that I know where my data is. So then you can get this software rental option they call SOP. Costs a little less because you're going to be paying a hoster for it. You still got to pay the data center, but you can put that software in that data center and have a little more control over it. And then the third license is perpetual, which is the classic way of buying software, where you buy it as a capital expense, you own it, and you pay a maintenance plan to keep the updates coming, but then you're responsible for doing the upgrades, backups, disaster recovery, virus protection, all the software licensing for SQL, Office, that type of thing falls, on you to keep that current. So so it's nice to have all three options. And the summary just kind of goes over the key features. So anybody have any general questions they want to ask? Okay. Well, we appreciate, James, I appreciate you doing the demonstration for us. My contact information, I think here is up here on the screen. What we do is a free discovery. So if you have any type of ERP system integration experience type of problem, something that maybe you don't want to get rid of the whole system, but you want to fix a certain area, AccuNet can certainly take a look at that and make some recommendations that may not involve replacing the system. But if you're running into some of these issues and limitations where you can't go mobile, you're having a lot of terminal server licenses to distribute your application, and you just don't have some of the modern web-like features that we get in these newer applications, then we can go through and help you build the requirements, match that up, and do a proposal so you can decide if that's something that you can swing. So we'd love to discuss those new systems with you. So I will go ahead and leave it with that. Anybody else want to jump in and ask any last minute questions? All right, everybody, it was great to see some of these old familiar faces. So thanks all these existing customers and consultants that I've worked with over the years. I appreciate seeing you online. All right, we'll let everybody go. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, James.